It's not my fault you're a loser. That's what my sister said. Right in the middle of the family lunch, as she flicked her perfect hair over her shoulder and laughed like she was in a sitcom and the rest of us were extras. Everyone heard it. No one said a word. Not my dad, who just kept slicing his steak. Not my mom, who reached for the wine bottle like it might give her permission to disappear. Not my cousin Kyle, who smirked into his napkin. Not even my Aunt Cheryl, the supposed empath of the family, who just glanced out the window and said, "Look at those clouds rolling in." And me? I laughed. Quietly. Just enough to pass it off like it didn't matter. Like I hadn't heard it 100 different ways before. But this time, something inside me caught fire. I didn't lash out. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word either. I just smiled. Because I knew something none of them did. And they were going to find out. But before I tell my story, let me know in the comments where you're from, because I would love to know that my story is reaching different places. Also, if you enjoy, subscribe. It will really help the story reach more people. Anyways, you want to know the worst part? It wasn't even the first time she said something like that. Not even close. It was just the first time I didn't flinch. I remember being 12 years old, sitting at the breakfast bar in our old kitchen, scribbling in a notebook while she practiced dance routines for a talent show. She wore a sparkly leotard and lip gloss. I wore hand-me-downs and silence. "Why are you always writing in that thing?" she asked. "It's not like anyone's ever gonna read it." That was her at her nicest. As we got older, it got worse. At 15, "I don't think acting's for you. You kind of disappear on camera." At 19, "You moved to LA? That's brave for someone with no experience or money or connections." At 23, "Do you even have a job, or are you still doing that extra work where you walk past the camera?" Every time, it came with a smile, the kind that wasn't warm, the kind that said, "I hope you're still stupid enough to think I'm joking." But I never forgot a single word. I always felt like a ghost at these family things. My sister, Elena, would float through the house like royalty. Everyone wanted her attention. She was the star. She always had been. The one with the teeth, the voice, the perfect posture. Pageants, influencer deals, magazine spreads, engagements that made the local paper. And then there was me. The quiet one. The one who wasn't dating anyone serious. The one who tried a lot of different things. The one who just needs to find herself. At least that's how Mom put it when relatives asked. No one ever said actress. They said artist, like it was a bad word. They said dreamer, like it meant unemployed. They said free spirit, which was just code for failure. They didn't know I'd been auditioning under a stage name for years. They didn't know I had an agent. They didn't know I'd landed small roles in indie films, short runs in offbeat streaming shows, and one very quiet but very meaningful lead. They didn't know anything, because I never told them. That day, we were all gathered at my parents' house. Elena had organized the lunch. She made sure we all knew she'd made the potato salad herself, that she was taking a break from brand deals, and that she'd turned down an invite to Cabo just to be here. "Because family matters," she said, with a theatrical hand to her chest. We all clapped politely. She spent most of the meal talking about herself, her new skincare line, her new boyfriend, her new something I tuned out halfway through. I chewed slowly, sipped my drink, answered when asked. And then she turned to me. "So, what are you doing now?" Elena asked, in that faux curious tone she'd mastered. "Still finding yourself." There it was. I smiled politely and said, "Still exploring." She raised an eyebrow. Must be nice to live in a constant gap year. That got a few chuckles. Uncle Drew laughed so hard he slapped the table. And then, just before dessert, just before anyone could change the subject, she dropped it. With that smug little shrug, she tilted her head and said, "It's not my fault you're a loser. You ever feel something inside you go quiet? Not broken, not crushed, just still? Like your soul sits down and says, okay, that's enough." That's what happened to me. I looked around the table and realized I wasn't even angry. I was past that. I had reached the place beyond rage. I had reached clarity. Because in less than 2 hours, something was going to happen. Something none of them could ignore. And I didn't have to lift a finger to make it happen. So, I just nodded. Took a bite of my roll, chewed slowly, made eye contact with her, and smiled. That seemed to bother her more than anything I could have said. They didn't know that 3 weeks earlier, I had finished filming my first lead role in a feature film. They didn't know the production company had secured a last-minute ad spot during the Super Bowl to promote it. A bold move for an indie, but it paid off. They didn't know the trailer would air nationally that day. They didn't know I would be the face that filled their 65-inch screen. But I knew. And I had a front row seat to their faces. That lunch was the last time any of them would ever look at me the same way again. Especially her. The one who called me a loser. I don't remember a time when my sister didn't shine. She came into the world with a spotlight already fixed on her, and somehow, it just stayed there. Dance recitals, spelling bees, choir solos. If there was a stage, she was on it. And if I was nearby, I was probably holding her coat. People used to say, "She's going to be something." No one ever said that about me. They said, "She's so quiet," or "She's artistic," which was their polite way of saying, "We don't really get her." And maybe they didn't. I was a quiet kid, shy, always tucked into corners with a notebook or a book or an old DVD of a movie I'd already watched a dozen times. I wasn't trying to be difficult. I just preferred the imaginary world to the real one. The real world was loud and cruel and full of people like my sister, who didn't mean to step on you. She just didn't notice you were there. One night when I was 10, I stayed up late watching Roman Holiday under the covers with headphones on. Audrey Hepburn looked so weightless in that film, like even gravity made exceptions for her. I whispered to myself, I want to do that. Not just be her. Not just act. I wanted to become someone else. Tell stories, live inside them. But the next day, when I said it out loud over breakfast, my sister snorted into her cereal and said, "You? On camera? You don't even talk loud enough for roll call." My mom chuckled and said, "Sweetie, you need thicker skin for something like that." My dad nodded and added, "And a backup plan." I never brought it up again. Years later, when I packed up and moved to LA, I didn't even tell them the real reason. They thought I was chasing some vague dream, or maybe just finding myself, like they loved to say. But I knew exactly what I was doing. I got a tiny studio apartment the size of a storage unit. I enrolled in night acting classes, and during the day, I worked any job I could find. Waitressing, dog walking, handing out flyers on Sunset Boulevard in a chicken costume once. There were nights I fell asleep fully dressed, still clutching my sides from laughing too hard in improv class. There were mornings I cried in the shower because I had no idea how I was going to make rent. But I never once called home to complain. I let them believe I was wandering. That made it easier. If I failed, I could fail quietly. If I succeeded, well, then I'd decide when they found out. I used a stage name from the beginning. It wasn't even that far off. Just my first and middle names reversed, with a shortened last name that didn't immediately trace back to me. When people asked why, I told them it was about creative freedom. But the truth is, I didn't want my family to find me. Not yet. Not until I had something to show. There's a strange freedom in anonymity. I could bomb an audition and no one would know. I could get cast in a student film or a commercial for allergy meds and not worry about being mocked at Christmas dinner. Once, my mom texted me, "Saw someone on a laundry commercial who looked like you. Ha ha, twins." It was me. I never answered. My sister kept posting photos of her life. Luxury gyms, ski resorts, brunches where the table was covered in tiny edible flowers. Her caption game was strong, always cheeky, always curated. Meanwhile, I was learning to cry on command in a cold basement theater for an audience of 6. But something about that made me feel real, like I was scraping the truth out from under all the filters and flash. I didn't need approval. I needed truth. And LA, for all its fake smiles and broken promises, gave me that. The first time I landed a role with actual lines, I called my roommate and cried. We split a cupcake to celebrate. I played a grocery store clerk with 3 scenes and 1 emotional beat, and I nailed it. The check barely covered groceries, but it lit something in me I didn't know I had. The next few years were a blur of day jobs, auditions, and close calls. I came so close to quitting, more than once. But every time I saw the red light on a camera, I remembered why I was still trying. Because this was the only place I didn't feel invisible. On stage, on set, even just in a workshop with 5 folding chairs and a bad mic, I was seen. Not as someone's sister, not as the quiet one, just as me. Back home, the story stayed the same. "She's still in LA," my mom would say at family functions, just doing her thing. "What is it she does exactly?" someone would always ask. My sister would chime in, "She's like a free spirit, I guess." And the conversation would move on. I didn't correct them. I didn't send updates. Let them think I was drifting. The truth was, I was building something. Slowly, quietly, brick by brick, roll by roll. And one day, the house would be tall enough for them to see from wherever they stood. They just didn't know it yet. I watched my sister's life from afar, too. She launched a lifestyle brand, modeled for a boutique jewelry line, got engaged, then unengaged, had a meltdown on Instagram Live that went viral and then mysteriously disappeared. Her spotlight never dimmed. It just flickered sometimes. But she always found her way back into the center. And every time she did, my parents would say, "She's so resilient. She always lands on her feet." No one ever asked how I was landing. But that was fine. Because I wasn't trying to land. I was trying to take off. Let them say I disappeared. Let them think I failed. Because sometimes vanishing is just what it looks like from the outside when someone is turning into someone else. And I had no intention of explaining myself until the moment I didn't have to. That moment was coming. It had a time slot, a title, a release date, and a screen big enough to wake up every last person who thought I was invisible. I still remember the exact moment it happened. I was in the back room of a thrift store, still wearing the apron from my shift. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I thought it was just another spam text, or maybe my roommate asking if I could pick up more oat milk. But it was from my agent. The message said, "Call me. Now." I stepped out into the alley behind the store, hands still damp from wiping down the counter, and hit dial. She didn't even say hello. She said, "You booked it." My chest collapsed. "Wait, what?" "The film, Lighthouse Parade, you got the lead." I leaned against the brick wall. It felt cold through my shirt. My heart was thudding so hard I could barely hear her. But she kept talking. "It's you. You're the one. They picked you out of 300 actresses. You killed that audition, and the callback sealed it." I pressed a hand to my mouth. I thought they passed, I whispered. They did pass. On everyone else. The movie was a quiet indie drama with a soul punch of a script. It was the kind of role actresses dream about, gritty, grounded, honest. I had read it a dozen times before the audition and cried every time. They filmed it mostly in Northern California. Long days, cold beaches, one motel after another. But I didn't care. I had a trailer. I had a dressing room with my name taped to the door. I had people handing me water bottles and asking if I needed anything. I also had pressure like I'd never known. I wasn't just a character in this film. I was the film. My face was in every scene. My voice carried the arc. If I failed, the whole thing cracked. But I didn't fail. Something in me rose to meet the moment. Every scene felt like I was stitching myself back together after years of being invisible. It was like all the roles I hadn't gotten, all the almosts and will pass, had been preparing me for this. When we wrapped, the director hugged me for a full minute. "You made this breathe," he said. The cinematographer sent me a handwritten note. "You didn't act. You became." And my agent? She cried when she saw the final cut. "They're going to eat this up," she told me. "Sundance, Tribeca, maybe even TIFF. It's already getting buzz." I stared at her. "Wait, like actual buzz? She nodded. "They're talking awards." But with the buzz came rules. The production team made one thing clear: total secrecy until launch. They wanted the reveal to be clean, sharp, cinematic, no leaks, no hints. The trailer would drop on Super Bowl Sunday during a premium commercial slot. A surprise debut. Old school meets new wave marketing. So I kept quiet. Online, I said nothing. No behind-the-scenes shots, no cryptic something big coming tweets. I didn't even tell my roommate, just said I had a gig out of town and would be gone a while. Back home, my family assumed I was just floating. I'd reply to texts late, say I was busy with projects. They read projects as probably unemployed. I didn't correct them. Let them believe whatever story made them feel superior, because the truth was being carved behind the scenes. And when it landed, it would speak louder than anything I ever could. I lived between hotel rooms and sound stages for 3 months. Sometimes I'd wake up and forget what city I was in. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, blinking at the curtain, trying to place the pattern. But I was happy, exhausted, overwhelmed, but happy. There were moments during filming when I'd slip into character so deep I forgot the cameras were there. And when the director called cut, it felt like being yanked out of a dream. There were nights I cried on set, not from the script, but from the realization that I'd made it. Quietly, on my own terms, no viral audition tape, no family connections, no influencer boost, just work, years of it, and now, this. My sister called once during filming. "Hey," she said casually, "you still in LA, or did you finally come home?" "I'm away for work," I said. "Oh," she replied. "Doing what exactly?" I paused. "Helping on a project," she scoffed. "So, still drifting?" I didn't argue. Let her think I was lost, because in less than a month she'd see the full picture, on a screen big enough for the whole country to notice. The studio emailed me the schedule. Sunday, 6:38 p.m., third quarter, Super Bowl commercial block. That's when the trailer would air. I stared at the timestamp. I knew what that meant. It meant millions of people, families gathered around TVs, wings and beer in hand, would be watching when my face appeared on screen. And I knew exactly where my family would be. At my parents' house. Watching on their 70-inch flat screen, like they did every year, all of them in one room, including her. I marked the date on my calendar, didn't tell anyone, didn't hint, didn't gloat, just circled it in red and went about my week, even booked a train ticket home. My mom texted, You're actually coming this year? Elena will be so thrilled. I smiled at that. I had one bag, a new dress, and a simple plan. Sit, watch, let the screen speak. Because after years of being talked over, dismissed, ignored, laughed at, I finally had a voice they couldn't interrupt. There's a particular kind of quiet that settles over a family lunch when everyone's pretending to be happy. The clink of silverware, the forced laughter, the inside jokes you were never part of. That was the soundtrack of my Sunday afternoon. The dining room looked like a spread from a magazine. White linens, gold chargers, my mom's antique china, the ones she only brought out when Elena was home. My sister was the sun, as usual. Every head turned toward her, every story bent around her like gravity. I told the brand rep, Elena said, tossing her glossy hair. I don't do plastic brushes anymore. It's all cruelty-free, or I walk. People laughed. They always did. Elena's tone made everything sound like a punchline, even when it wasn't funny. That's just how I roll, Elena added, sipping from a glass of rosé. They know I'm not cheap. I sat 2 seats down, smiling like wallpaper. My aunt leaned toward me and whispered, "So what are you up to now? Still traveling?" "Just working," I said simply. She gave me a polite nod. That kind of nod people give when they don't really want details. Elena didn't miss a beat. "She's being mysterious again," Elena said with a chuckle. "She always gets this way when things aren't going well." The table laughed again. I didn't flinch. They weren't being cruel, not in the way people scream or throw things. It was subtler than that, sharper because it came wrapped in family. Elena had always known how to dominate a room, by speaking just loudly enough to make sure I heard her. The food was beautiful, like always. My mother had outdone herself. Roast chicken, green beans with almonds, her famous potatoes au gratin. And yet, all I could taste was the way Elena kept circling me like a cat toying with a mouse. "I almost didn't make it," Elena said. "Jet lag is brutal after Cabo." "Oh, Cabo again?" someone asked. She nodded. "Content trip. You wouldn't believe how many reels I had to post to get the algorithm to cooperate." "Is that the one where you're on the paddleboard in the white bikini?" my cousin asked. Elena giggled. "That one's already hit 50,000 likes. "Goals," said another cousin. I sat back, chewing slowly. I knew what they thought. I'd seen it in their faces for years. Elena was the success story. I was the footnote. No one asked what I'd been doing. No one noticed how I didn't flinch anymore. After the plates were cleared, everyone migrated to the living room like always. My parents' house was custom built, with a vaulted ceiling and built-in speakers. The flat screen mounted above the fireplace had been my dad's pride and joy. He bought it the same year Elena signed her first brand deal. My mom brought out dessert, a lemon tart with fresh raspberries, my sister's favorite. "She's allergic to strawberries now," my mom had told me earlier. Apparently, it bloats her on camera. I sat on the edge of the couch, balancing a dessert plate on my lap. The room buzzed with talk of the upcoming Super Bowl commercials. Who got ad time? Which celebrities would be featured? Elena stretched across the ottoman like a cat in a sunbeam. "Ugh, I hope they don't bring back that singing baby," she said. "Gives me nightmares." "Not a fan of babies, huh?" my uncle joked. Elena smiled, "Only if they're filtered." More laughter. And then, right before dessert was served, she turned to me, out of nowhere, with that same performative tone she used for interviews. "It's not my fault you're a loser." She said it like a joke, like a punchline. But it wasn't funny, not even a little. The air shifted. Forks paused mid-bite. Someone let out a soft, nervous laugh, but it died fast. My mom blinked, looked away. My dad adjusted the remote in his lap. No one said a thing. I stared down at my plate, breathing in slow. Not this time. This time, I wasn't going to shrink. I set the plate down on the coffee table, stood up, and without a word, I walked across the room toward the living room TV. No one asked what I was doing, not Elena, not my parents, not a single person, because for the first time ever, they noticed the change in my walk. I wasn't leaving the room, I was stepping into it. The plates were cleared, the lemon tart mostly picked apart. A few glasses still held traces of rosé and citrus. The energy in the house had shifted, not in any obvious way, but subtly. The way a room feels when something has been said that no one wants to revisit. Everyone was moving back toward the living room, easing into the next act of the afternoon, the Super Bowl. My dad fiddled with the remote, making sure the pregame was streaming. My mom fluffed the pillows on the sectional, a little too deliberately. I returned to my corner of the couch, quietly. Same as always. Elena reclaimed her position in the center, arms stretched across the cushions like she was royalty. The cousins sprawled on the floor with paper plates and second servings. My Uncle Paul said, "Let me guess, they'll start with that talking lizard again." My mom replied, "As long as it's not those weird clowns from last year. I couldn't sleep for 2 nights. Elena chimed in with a chuckle. "Oh, please, the clowns were iconic. The lizard needs to retire." I didn't say a word. I sat, watched, waited. My heart wasn't pounding, it was calm, as if my body already knew this moment was mine. The game began, and with it a parade of commercials, a soda brand with an actor in a chicken costume, a car ad where everything exploded in slow motion, a sentimental piece about dogs and soldiers that made my aunt tear up. And then, the screen went black. Total silence. For a moment I thought the stream glitched. My dad grunted, reaching for the remote. Then a piano note, software dissonant, haunting. A single image faded in. A hospital hallway, diamond sois cold. A woman stood beneath a flickering light, disheveled, pale, her eyes wide and wet, staring into a mirror as her hand trembled over a piece of paper. Me. My cousin Tyler leaned forward. Tyler said, "Wait a second." The scene shifted. Me again, screaming into the wind on a cliffside, running barefoot through an alley, cradling a child, covered in blood, laughing manically at a dinner table, a rapid sequence of emotion and story, the music built beneath it all. Then came the voiceover. My voice. They said I was too quiet to be dangerous, that I could be controlled, forgotten, but the quiet ones are always the ones you should fear. Elena sat up straight. Elena said, "Is that you?" No one answered her. They were too busy watching the screen. Another wave of scenes, courtroom, flashbulbs, slammed doors, a single tear, a knife dropped on tile, a kiss, a confession. Then the final image. Me standing in the center of a room lit only by the reflection of a burning curtain. Starring Elena Ross. Coming to theaters nationwide. Official selection, Sundance, Tribeca, TIFF. Fade to black. The room stayed quiet. No one spoke. I didn't move. I just leaned back into the couch. I let them sit in it. Silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's deafening. The room sat in a kind of stunned paralysis. The Super Bowl broadcast resumed, flashy graphics, commentators shouting with excitement. But no one in the room was watching. It was as if the air had thickened, as if the oxygen had been sucked out and replaced with disbelief. My cousin Tyler was the first to break the silence. Tyler said, "Wait, was that you?" He looked at me like he'd never seen me before, because in many ways, he hadn't. I didn't say anything yet. I just offered a slight smile. My heart stayed calm, steady. Then came the avalanche. My Aunt Lorraine gasped, Aunt Lorraine said, "Elena Ross? That's you? That's your name?" My mother sat frozen, one hand lightly touching her chest like she was trying to feel whether it was still beating. My father, ever the quiet one, blinked rapidly and stared straight ahead, as if the trailer might play again and give him more answers. And then Alana spoke. Alana said, "That can't be real." Her voice cracked. The bravado was gone, just a raw edge, straining to sound amused. Alana added, "That was some kind of deepfake, right? You can't just fake a movie trailer like that?" I finally spoke, calm, even. I said, "It premieres in theaters next month." A beat. Then another cousin said, "No way." "I saw the studio logo. That's real. That's big." The chatter rose like a tide, disjointed questions tumbling out all at once. "How long have you been acting? Why didn't you tell us? Is Elena Ross your stage name? Did you really write that line about being too quiet to be dangerous?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked around the room, taking in their faces, the same ones that used to look through me, not at me. Alana stared at the TV like it might undo what it had just shown. Alana said, "You always said you were working odd jobs." I nodded. I said, "I was. While I trained, while I auditioned, while I filmed." My mom's voice was barely above a whisper. My mom said, "All those times you came home tired." "You were filming?" I said, "Sometimes. Other times I was bartending, cleaning trailers, taking the bus to acting class." My dad finally found his voice. My dad said, "We thought you were lost." I met his eyes. I said, "I was finding myself. You just didn't ask where I was looking." The room quieted again. Back on the TV, the game kept playing. Players ran across the screen, fans cheered, but it all sounded far away, like static. Someone had turned the volume down, but no one had moved. My cousin Nadia leaned toward my mom. Nadia said, "She's in a Sundance film. That's huge. People work their whole lives to get that." My mom didn't reply. I looked around again. This time, I saw something different in their faces. Not just shock, not just surprise, but a crack in the version of me they'd always chosen to believe. I said, "I kept it private on purpose. I wanted to build something without commentary." Alana folded her arms. Alana said, "So you've been lying this whole time?" I raised an eyebrow. I said, "No." I was surviving, growing, protecting what mattered until it was strong enough to stand on its own. More silence. Then Tyler laughed, a light, amazed sound. Tyler said, "Dude, you're gonna be famous." I smiled, but only faintly. I said, "That's not what matters. What mattered was this moment, this room, this truth that now lived between us. No one would call me a loser again. And if they did, it wouldn't sting. Because the quiet one just made the loudest entrance of all." The silence lingered far longer than anyone expected. The game blared on, but it had lost its hold on the room. Voices on the screen screamed over touchdowns and missed kicks, but the real spectacle had already aired. And it was mine. I stayed seated for a moment, hands resting on my knees, soaking in the strangeness of it all, the disbelief, the confusion, the way some family members avoided eye contact while others still stared at me like I might dissolve if they blinked. No one quite knew what to say. After a lifetime of being the one overlooked, I had finally become the one no one could ignore. I looked around slowly, taking in every face. Cousin Nadia, still slack-jawed, her plate of pie untouched. Uncle Paul, shaking his head like the trailer had scrambled his understanding of the world. My mother, blinking fast, like trying to recall every moment she'd ever dismissed me. And then Alana. She sat stiffly, arms folded tight, her mouth drawn into a line. There was no smirk left, no gloating, just shock. maybe even a little fear. For years, her voice had cut through every room we shared. Her confidence had always dwarfed my silence. And now? The room had shifted. The balance of power had reversed, and I hadn't said more than 10 words. That was the magic of truth. When it finally arrives, it doesn't have to yell. It just has to be seen. I turned back toward the TV briefly. The broadcast continued, commercials, commentary, confetti graphics. But no one was paying attention. They were still back in that trailer, watching me scream, cry, run, whisper, watching me act, watching me become. I stood. It was a simple motion, but it drew every gaze. The kind of silence that wraps around you like velvet, the kind that begs not to be broken. My father cleared his throat. My father asked, "You're leaving already?" I nodded, smoothing the front of my blouse. I said, "I have an early flight. Press events start tomorrow." My mother rose slightly, uncertain, as if unsure whether to hug me or ask 100 questions. But she did neither. She just stood there, watching me like she didn't know who I was. I leaned down and kissed her on the cheek. I said, "Thanks for lunch, Mom." Then I turned to my father and did the same. I said, "Enjoy the game, Dad." I walked to the front door without a rush. My heels echoed softly on the tile, the only sound in the room besides the distant buzz of the television. As I reached for the doorknob, Alana's voice cracked behind me. Alana said, "You lied to us." I turned slowly. I said, "No. I protected what mattered. You made it clear my dreams weren't welcome at this table, so I stopped bringing them here." Her face faltered, like the foundation had cracked. Alana said, "You made it all about you." I almost smiled. I said, "For once, yes." And look what happened. I opened the door. The afternoon sun spilled in across the carpet. The air smelled fresh, salt, and citrus, like freedom. Outside, the driver stood beside the car, waiting. He didn't look at me like I was a disappointment. He didn't see a loser. He opened the door with a nod. I looked back at the house one last time. Not with spite, not even sadness. Just clarity. They had called me a failure behind my back. They had mocked me when I took buses, when I worked midnight shifts, when I skipped weddings because I couldn't afford it. They wrote me off. And now? Now my story was being written in credits and lights and premiere invitations. As I stepped outside, I heard a cousin murmur, "She was Elena Ross this whole time?" I didn't turn around. I didn't owe them more. I slid into the car, adjusted the seatbelt, and let the door shut with a satisfying click. The driver asked, "Airport?" I said, "Yes. And thank you." As the car pulled away, I allowed myself one last look in the rearview mirror. No one had followed. No one had stepped onto the porch. That was fine. Because they had already seen me. They had seen what I built. They had watched the trailer, the proof that I'd turned silence into spectacle, invisibility into power. They would never unsee it, and I would never forget it. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Dozens of notifications blinked across the screen. Mentions, shares, articles. Who is Elena Ross? She stole the show. A breakout performance. But none of that compared to the moment I had just walked away from. Let them call me cold. Let them say I should have stayed. Let them wonder why I didn't linger for pie or gossip. But they'd miss the truth if they did. I didn't leave because I was proud. I left because I was finally whole. Whole enough to choose myself. Whole enough to walk away. And as I stared out the window at the setting sun, I whispered, just for me. She called me a loser. So I let the whole country see me win. before she even had time to blink.